Namaste, Sadakas. Um, so I meant to do this a while ago when Om Shanti was away in India, but never got around to it. So I'm just going to be giving a talk and hopefully more than one of these talks. But just, some spiritual content, spiritual discourse. So I thought that I would share some knowledge and some of the tools that Dharma, my teacher Dharma, Sri Dharma Mitra, holds very close to his heart, and so he talks about them a lot. And in fact, he got called out by people because they go to his conferences, they go to his lectures, and I hear students say, he's always talking about the same thing all the time, all the time. And then, just as though he was psychic, Dharma Mitra would then say in the class, the next class, like, people think that I say the same thing over and over again. It's because it's very important. You can hear something for like 50 times, the same thing, and it will never register the first 50 times. So you have to keep on trying. It's part of the practice. It's like trying to get an asana, right? Sometimes it takes a long time to master a pose, but the more times you repeat, the more you're likely to find success. So same with the teachings. The more you hear them, the more they become ingrained in you. So my talk today will be on the yamas and the niyamas. But before we do that, let's just start off with an om. So close the eyes, sit tall and straight. Before creation, what existed? God was always there in the midst of it all, that divine spark, and will still be there even beyond the ends of this universe. Tune your mind to that supreme divine consciousness that is within and all around us. Oh. May all beings everywhere be happy and free from suffering and enjoy this practice to our senses. May we always have a strong desire for the knowledge that liberates us from pain and suffering, and may we acquire the intellect to attain that knowledge. And may we cherish no ill feelings against each other, only ever peace, love, joy, and compassion. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. So, first of all, excuse my voice. I think I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold, so my voice might break once in a while. So, I'll do my best. So, first of all, the yamas, there's a good reason why it's at the forefront of the practice. It is the first limb of the Ashtanga Yoga, the 8-limb path to self-realization. And there's a good reason for it. It's because it's the most important. It's the foundation of the whole practice. You cannot um, hope to have success along the path unless you're firmly ingrained in Yama. It has to be present all along the way. Is like the stone that holds the ladder in place. If you take away this stone, the ladder will just fall out from underneath you. Or it's like the roots of a tree that nourish the tree that keep the tree stable. So all that to say is that without the yama, there is no foundation for the practice. There is no way that you can gain success in your meditation. The mind will always be restless, always desiring, always in a state that is not conducive to really merging with God. So it is therefore vital that that we have a good understanding of what that is and the importance of this. So it means being act in a way that doesn't take away the comfort and the happiness of others. Is the first step to cultivating it is to see yourself in others. So if you see yourself in others, then chances are you will treat others in a way that you would want to be treated yourself. That's a first step. And an extension of that is to see God in all beings, because God, there is divine spark in each and every being. We are all God in different forms. We're all divine manifestations. And so if we see divinity everywhere, if we see that, if we can understand and we can remember that, then we're less likely to act in a way that is not aligned with that's not aligned with the ethical rules. Yamas are in effect those ethical rules. So it's like, a religion has its own set of values or rules that we had to follow in order to keep the order. This is the same type of idea for the yamas in yoga. So it's is acting in a way that won't bring harm and suffering to others, because ultimately that's going to come back to you. We The suffering that we go through is a result of our past deeds, and so everything that we are experiencing now, any kind of suffering that we're experiencing now, is for spiritual correction, is according to the divine plan, and is to help us to evolve. So the idea is to have a good understanding of not only the importance of ahimsa and the ethical rules, but also the laws of karma as well. They tie very close together. The laws of karma are basically, like what we're experiencing now is a reflection of what we did in the past. And if we sometimes get a sense of, my Dharma Ji likes to say, like if we're feeling depressed sometimes we can't explain why we're all of a sudden feeling sad, or disturbed. Could be from our impressions from the past, reflections from our past deeds that are making us feel maybe that we feel a bit of remorse for what we did is coming back to us in some way. So the best thing to do is to just always try to do your best to correct, um, to just reflect of, if we sense that we did something wrong, um, to just make up for it somehow. So one way is to offer up the practice, to see God in all the beings, to see all beings as divine, and that will help us to cultivate compassion towards others. Once we start to see God in all the forms and all the beautiful, magnificent ways that God is present in this world through all the different forms, each and every form and being has their beautiful qualities or traits, um, then how could we want to hurt anybody or anything? If we see the beauty in all these forms, if we see God in all the forms, we tend to be more careful. And like Dharmaji also likes to say, like eventually we get to the point in our practice where if we see God everywhere, we're very careful about what we are doing, because we don't want to risk acting in a way that is, not compassionate in God's eyes, right? So we have to be aware of what we're doing every moment of the day, although this seems very um, overbearing and overwhelming sometimes, and people don't like to maybe think about this fact that, we're being watched all the time. We have to always be on our guard. The good news is that, as you progress through your path to self-realization, it gets easier every time. Every time you come back, it's like an upgrade to phone. Each one is better than the one before it. So we are always on the path to improving, to self-improvement. And so it becomes easier. The more knowledge we have, the more we understand how to avoid the patterns that cause pain and suffering. So that's good news that, we're always moving forward, and it gets easier after time. Um, so yes, one good way is to make up. We always try to be careful what we're doing, saying, thinking, and at some point the compassion is going to be well ingrained, so it becomes a driving force behind all action, thoughts, and word. And so we are always trying to project positivity, always projecting the best of the best. And when we're doing our practice, we try to do the same thing. Like when we're practicing, we try to practice in a way that doesn't bring ourselves into a place of pain or anxiety or suffering because we try to imagine that all beings, to an extent, are being affected to an extent of what we're experiencing right here and right now. If it is true that there's a divine spark within each and every one of us, God is equally present in all forms, then of course we're connected to one another. So we want to act in a way that won't bring harm or pain to others. So then we become, that's a cue to us to practice in a way that is conscious, that's mindful, and that will deliver the best experience possible. So it's a very easy way to exercise compassion and to remember that, not everyone can practice, not everyone can enjoy, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be in like a yoga practice. It can be music, it can be whatever our gifts are. The duty is to share with others, um, our gifts with others. Everything is meant to be shared. So whether it's your gift is, knowledge, your intellect, your wisdom, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's what have you, sports, you grace others. We try to grace all beings. We imagine that all beings are experiencing it through us. And that in itself is an act of compassion because demonstrating, we're sharing with others that they can't otherwise enjoy to the same extent, to the full extent, because it's not necessarily in them, maybe not in this life, but we all get the chance to experience everything. That's another beautiful thing to remember about the laws of karma. What you don't realize in this lifetime, you will achieve in the next life, in other subsequent lives. We are to realize everything. We're to experience everything on the path to self-realization. So we do the best we can because given that, we all have karmas to resolve because of our actions, we never know where we're going to be in the next life. So we want to do our best to possess ourselves in the right path. Whatever happened in our next life, we don't have, we can't see that into the future. So we do our best so that when we get there, uh, we are already in we put ourselves, try to position ourselves so we're already in a higher place. So it's all about doing our best to just move forward in a positive way. Um, Dharma has, he says something really beautiful. He says, when you leave this life, once you attain self-realization, that is the end of pain and suffering. You're not no longer affected to it because you have the knowledge to know how to understand that um, the suffering is just felt by the body and the mind. It's not the true self that's being affected. The true self is actionless, is unaffected by the suffering, and is by that part that moves from body to body with each passing life. So he says, when you're self-realized, you have the choice to come back and to help others. And so you can come back and voluntarily to a place of suffering to help others, to help relieve them of their suffering by sharing the knowledge. And since, if you do attain that self-realization, you don't have to worry about the suffering because you will have the knowledge to not be affected by that. So, and it's also if you're not quite at self-realization yet, you still not quite there, but it's a way again to make up for the deeds of your past. So always moving up to higher places, as always. And so there's I just wanted to share something. There's sometimes you get into situations where you're very hurt by others. And then I know that Dharmaji often says, sometimes you have to love people at distance. You can't, if they're hurting you, you have to remove yourself from that situation. And even though it might mean letting go of a friendship or even like a relation, cutting the ties, so to speak, or to like just try to avoid the person who's hurting you, even if it's someone very close, even if it's a family member, although it might not seem to be a compassionate deed. um, you have to think about the greater good. And so if it is by being with this individual is causing you to lose yourself, is causing you to not um, fulfill yourself as, to the highest extent in a most compassionate way to others, then that is the point where you have to sort of make that hard call that, you do have to distance yourself. Deep down inside, you really try to see them as God. Deep down inside, there is that divine spark within them. It's just that they're stuck maybe in that place where they're need to evolve a little bit. They need to experience some. Um, they need to resolve some of their karmas. They need to work through their own karmas. Um, so even though it might not seem like a compassionate act on the surface, you have to think about your path as well. So if it is preventing you from fulfilling your duty and from acting in a way that is in accordance to the ethical rules for you, then and you can't serve fully to your fully in the most in the best way that you can, then that's a point where you might have to step back from that relationship and to remove yourself from it. It's a very difficult thing to do, and I was struggling with this um, for the past few months. I was beating myself up because someone hurt me very, very, very badly, and I was feeling very, you know, very upset at myself because I couldn't. I was having a hard time really understanding and even forgiving this person. I'm still feeling triggered, when I see this person's actions and they continue to hurt others in the same way. And it's really, it's very painful to witness, and it's very painful to experience. And I really lost myself. And, and sometimes I did everything to try to support this person and went way, let them step all over my boundaries. And um, and then I realized that, I can't do this anymore. It's not good for me, and it's really, I started to really loathe myself. So in that case, if I can't even love myself, then how can I really fully share with others in the best way possible? So um, sometimes we had to make that hard call. Um, what is going to serve God and others in the best way possible. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to share because I struggled with this a lot, um, and I suffered a great deal. Um, I'm still not quite there yet. Still trying to heal, um, and just trying to, as a human, we experience a lot of emotions, and sometimes it takes time to resolve those emotions, But as you get, again, as you gain more knowledge, you are able to bounce back more easily. As if you have a good understanding of the laws of karma, that was hard too, right? Because you're thinking that, I deserve this. This is happening to me because of I must have done something very horrible in the past, something equivalent, and so it's coming back to me now. And so, but sometimes the emotions sort of cloud that. They get into the way, and so you have to sort of give yourself time to work past that too. But eventually, things this too will pass, as they say. It sounds dismissive, but it does. With over time, it does become easier, and like as you get more and more knowledge, then it becomes as I said, you're able to bounce back more easily from your pain and your suffering because you know that it's all done for the good And, if this hadn't happened, it would have, there's a lot of things that are happening now that are exciting for me that would never have happened if I'd stayed in that relationship. I would have been stagnant. I would have stayed in that, and I wouldn't have grown. So now I'm able to do other things I wouldn't have otherwise because I was, supporting in a supporting role for this other person. And now that I'm free of that, I can explore ways I can really serve others in a better way, in a, and many more people in a different way and in bigger ways. So that was a long spiel on ahimsa and why, because that's the most important one. From ahimsa, all the other ones stem. And you can't really fully exercise the other ones without having a good base in ahimsa. So, moving on, like basically, for example, to satya, truth. Of course, it's important to say the truth and to be true, to be established in the truth, but you also have to deliver the truth in a compassionate way. Some You might have noticed that, you may experience yourself that, um, sometimes people can deliver the truth in a very, very hurtful way, and sometimes people seem to get uh, feel empowered by that. They feel like it's a bit of a control mechanism or a power, what do you call it? A power rush or a power, um, they get off on that. And really, um, if it's going to hurt someone, then you have to really think of how you're going to, then you have to really think about what your actions are, what your intentions are. So, you have to be very careful too about how you express the truth. And you also have to be careful about how you receive the truth from others too. You have to be respectful of other people's truths. Some people believe that sometimes we believe that we're 100% right, but in fact, we're 100% wrong in someone else's eyes. Truth is, depending on our conditions, depending on our experiences that we lived, it's according to our perception. So what is true for us may be absolutely not valid and not reasonable in someone else's eyes. So we do have to be receptive to that and understanding of that. That again is an idea, an extension of compassion. We can't just always assume that we're always in the right. Um, there's many levels, right? Like everything else, there's many levels of compassion. As we get further and further in our practice, our understanding and our exercising of it becomes more and more subtle. All of us know we can't go around killing people, but you know that that idea of harm can really there's so many levels that you can be harmful or not be compassionate. And we can't necessarily get stuck in like always just stay holed up in our houses forever because we're afraid of hurting others. The minute you walk outside, God knows how many bugs you step on, right? um, but we do our best, right? So it's same with the truth. We do our best to understand where other people are coming from and to really put ourselves in other people's shoes and to see where their truth may be coming from. At some point, our truth is going to be their truth, in the next life, perhaps, maybe even. What we have to fulfill everything on a way to self realization. You have to experience everything. So, did they just say, like as Dharma G, my teacher says, maybe in this life he gives you the example, just say in this life you hate women or you hate whatever, you hate men, you hate Brazilian people, whatever the case may be. Watch out in the next life that you might end up in their shoes. So, it's a good thing to remember. You always have to look at the other side sometimes. You always have to you have to always be receptive to that. And the more, again, the more you practice being receptive to others, the more pain you'll save yourself in the end, like, or frustration, trying to convince others of your truth that might not necessarily be other people's truths. So, um, yeah. Okay, so that is that is just a way of respect too, and like compassion, to be uh aware and open to other people's perspectives. um Another thing that I love Dharma, like listening to Dharma, is when he says, gold from gold, no matter how gold comes from gold, no matter how you shape it, and watches and jewelry and whatever, it's still gold at the core. So just like we are all made from God, we are all, even like it says in the Bible, we are all made in God's image. So, we had to be remember that, like other people, other beings, um, their truth, their beauty is just as valid and beautiful and as true as ours. So all the more reason to just keep that in mind when you're listening to others. Asteya, non-stealing. So this is a big one. And again, this is an extension, like if you see God, how can you, in other beings, how can you steal from them? How can you take away from them? And there's so many ways that this plays out. It all boils down to respect and compassion. And um, so, not only taking what's not yours, but also not taking more than you need, not hoarding, not being respectful of people's time, not being too needy of other people's time, not trying to make a small footprint as possible on their time, and being respectful of their energy and their you know and their time. And so we want to essentially not being stealing and hoarding um, of other belongings that don't belong to us, and that extends to not only like physical possessions, but like just the knowledge and like the their whole energy. So also, just giving credit to where credit is due. If you use some people's knowledge, um then it's good to give credit to them. It's not always possible, but we want to be careful of just we want to be aware of that all knowledge is meant to be shared, and all that we're taking from others, the best way to get it out there is to the best way to appreciate it is to share it, of course, um, but to be grateful for what you received. And as a yoga teacher who's passing on the knowledge of our teachers, it's sort of understood in a way that they're expecting you to share the knowledge because it's helpful, right? If it helps us in some way, then we want to project it to others. Dharma also says, the greatest form of karma yoga is to share knowledge that helps people to grow spiritually and to remove the pain and suffering, to help them break the patterns that cause pain and suffering. So, and that's basically the knowledge of the true self, what the true self really is, and what, the causes of pain and suffering, the kleshas, the koshas, all these are really valuable pieces of knowledge. And, but it came from somewhere, right? So, even if you don't thank your teachers publicly, just always hold them in your heart and continue to share the knowledge in and don't necessarily do it with an intention of trying to reap the benefits from it. You know, even selfless service is basically you're not expecting anything in exchange for it. And a good way to practice non-stealing and compassion is to do some self-service without telling anybody about it, having it known, because then there's no hooks to it. There's no, no one feels obliged to get back to you. So that is a real test. So it's something that we can practice. I'll practice once in a while to just do selfless service, but without having it known to anybody. And that is a true test of compassion and like non-stealing and um, to give um, to share in a very positive and a compassionate and a selfless way. It all it helps us along the way, right? So um, yeah, so I mean, how that self-serve ties to non-stealing is that you're not someone else. If you give to somebody, they feel obliged to give back, and so they have to bring it in a way. It takes some of their energy to give back because they feel obligated. So this is why the truest form of selfless service is to do it without any expectation, without any knowledge of them knowing of it. So let's move on to the next one. Brahmacharya, self-discipline and control, constraint. Some translate it to be celibacy, but you don't necessarily have to be a celibate to practice this. You can still be a householder to practice brahmacharya. If you take the definition in that it is the purpose of self-discipline, using self-discipline, control the senses for the sake of advancing spiritually, for making spiritual progress. So that sexual energy, they say, is located, in the sacral chakra, in the area, the sacral area. That's where the reproductive organs are. So sexual energy has a lot of power, and so we don't want to waste it. It is a creative is known or conceived or perceived as a creative force that is very, very powerful. And so if you waste it through whatever sexual acts or whatever, if um, it could have been used for something else. If just imagine what it can do, how you can channel that if towards your spiritual path. So it's a gift, and you may not always have it. It may be strong at the certain times, and so when it comes, then really use it, really take advantage of it, and make spiritual progress. It ties into something I will talk about later. Like the niyamas, tapas. So they're sort of close. They're very closely linked. So you can channel that energy in very, very beneficial ways to help you to make spiritual progress. And because when the senses start to stray, um, you sometimes it's hard to control, and then sometimes um, you do acts that eventually might also lead to um, something that might not, that might again be in misalignment to the ethical rules sometimes. Like if you're taking it and you're just um, what if, for instance, if you were going around sleeping with others, what if that could eventually turn into um, what if maybe you transmit diseases or something that way, right? Inadvertently. So that's basically um, it's a way of that you can hurt others through this practice that is not necessarily careful or conscious. So again, it's being aware and conscious of how you're using that energy. Are you using it in a way that is the most compassionate and the best way possible to spread positivity and love. aparigraha, non-greed, non-attachment, non-clinging. And so, I mean, non-greed is an extension of in the way it's an extension of the, the non-stealing, right? But it goes a little bit further, like non-attachment. Try not to cling to others, because the more you cling, the more you're going to suffer when it goes away. Everything in this universe, because of the nature of the physical universe, is impermanent. And as a result, when it gets taken away, then that will cause suffering if we are attached to it. So, whether it's people, whether it's experiences, whether it's whatever it is in this physical universe, nothing in this physical universe can fulfill us entirely, because it goes away. So, what we want to um, remember is that, um, enjoy it, but don't get attached to it. And, so some people um, sometimes get the idea that, non-attached means we can't love our family and friends. What's the point? Because they're going to all die anyways, right? And then we get into this state of real frustration and sadness and confusion. But, according to, when we reincarnate, when we lose someone, um, they're going to go into another form. And it is said that we will meet our loved ones at one point again. And of course, they're not going to be in the same form. But since God is in all forms and we're all divine manifestations, then, that is what the true essence of us is. So, um, we're all always going to be together. We're never losing that. We're always that divine essence within us, never born, never dies. It is everywhere. It pervades everything, and so we're always going to be with our loved ones. So, and when we attain self-realization, that's beginning of divine perception. That's when we see God everywhere, and no matter what form or what shape or what body they're in, we're going to just automatically see God everywhere. And so that is a point where we're that is um that's the reason why we don't suffer as much, because we are able to see that we're not affected by, just like the forms, we're not distracted by the forms. And um the forms, in a way, when we're, especially in our lower, when we're younger souls and we don't recognize that divine essence within, we we tend to see separation, the different forms, and like um the worst manifestation, or some of the worst manifestations is when, we see isolation. That's where the discrimination, that's where like the racism comes in. That's when we see few animals as lower beings as us, and et cetera, right? So we when we have divine perception, we're able to see through all that. We're not affected by, we're not distracted by the forms. We're not phased by the forms. We're not judging the forms. They're all beautiful. They're all forms of God in the end. They're all manifestations of God. So now, those were the yamas, and now we move on to the niyamas. So these are the observances, and in a way, they are how we put the yamas into practice. So they're very closely linked again. So often we talk about the yamas and the yamas together. Um, and they're like, sort of spaghetti in the sauce, right? So we tend to, you see, sort of like when you start to understand them, you'll see sort of the linkage between um, these that I'm about to talk about, the observances and the yamas, and how it's important to have them both together. Otherwise, it's not quite, you don't get the complete picture. So, Shalcha, purity. And this is not only purity of the body, it's purity of the mind, it's purity of the heart. And how do we get that is through the practice. Through the physical practice, we make the body pure, we make the body healthy, and the idea is to try to make the body sort of like a temple for the Almighty One who resides within, a habitable place for the God to flourish within. You know, we want a clean house. We want it to always be clean for our important visitors, our VIPs, right? So that is like why we do the physical practice, why we do the postures, why we do the pranayama. The pranayama also is helps to control the mind, and you know when the mind is in control, we're more likely to be able to control the behavior a little bit better. And of course, how to control the behavior is, you know, it's an extension of it's basically playing out the ethical rules, behaving with truth, behaving with a way that is not stealing, that is not hoarding, that is not clinging, not attaching to other to things and persons, and you know, in a truthful way and in a way that is, you know, the aspect of your energy that you're trying to contain and to direct towards spiritual growth. So this is how we um, this is how we cultivate purity in our lives of the mind, the body, and the soul by following the ethical rules. And so we just try to maintain that purity in all that we do in our practice, in our comportment, in our day-to-day activities. The practice doesn't stop when we're on the mat. When we're off the mat, we have to continue in our day-to-day lives. So all the purity that we're of the behavior that we're comporting on the mat is easy enough to offer up the practice when we're on the mat, and to, you know, act in a way that is sattvic, but when we go in the world, we have to continue that. We can't just stop, right? So we have to continue to exercise purity of behavior in when we're out in public in society. Santosha, contentment. So this, how do we cultivate compassion? How do we cultivate santosha? Is through the understanding of the laws of karma, especially because um, contentment means, you know, we're able to be able to stay stable, to not be not fall into despair when bad things come around, when bad situations, when suffering comes. We all have to suffer, but it's for a divine purpose. It is so that we can evolve, so we can learn a lesson, so that we don't do it again. We don't cause that fall into that pattern that will cause us to repeat and have to come back and relive it again. You know, so contentment and, you know, grows when we have a good sense of what the laws of karma mean. And so if we understand the laws of karma, chances are that we will act in a way that will attract good karma. So if we're acting in a way that is in observance, in line with the ethical rules, we're going to be rewarded by good karma. We're going to end up in good situations. We're not going to end up in a place where we're having to spiritually correct as much. Like the correction is going to be not as severe as, you know, for like our transgressions, I guess, our errant behavior. And and then when we see that we are in that place of contentment, we tend to want to stay there. And so this cultivates enthusiasm for keeping in adherence in keep remaining established in the ethical rules in Yama and Niyama. So everything is happening to us in a perfect way. So even the suffering is happening as a result of what we did in the past. There is for every action, there is a perfect consequence, there's a perfect um, spiritual correction path for that. And we try not to think of it as punishment because that might, you know, that sometimes um, puts it in a negative slant. It's everything is perfect and everything is rolling out in a perfect way for us to evolve and to grow. And the next time we come back, we're going to have that much more knowledge to um, keep going along in that path. Every life we get better, just like that phone that's being upgraded. So perfect doesn't necessarily mean easy. Some lessons are hard to learn than others, and sometimes it takes a long time to resolve these karmas, especially when we're at the beginning of the path. We don't have a lot of knowledge. Maybe it takes a few lifetimes to resolve certain karmas, right? But we be grateful, as we get further and further along our path, we recognize the value of these teachings. And we can even be grateful for those negative experiences because they help us to grow. And um, behind every, cloud, or along every cloud, sometimes there's a silver lining, right? As the saying goes. Sometimes things are happening to us in a way to help us to learn so that we can break through these barriers and then go to the next level and even be able to share more. So just as I was saying, in my experience that I was having, I would have never had the opportunity to explore, different, um, to grow as a musician, as a kirtan, um, someone who I do kirtan, I lead kirtan, and I wouldn't have had the experience, the chance to play with all these different people and to explore the different many, many, many new mantras and many new lineages and experience other, it wouldn't have happened if I had stayed in this particular, in this other group or this with this other person. Um, so, sometimes things are a blessing. So in disguise, we don't recognize it at this onset, but after time, everything becomes evident. And so we want to be receptive to all the experiences that are out there. As Dharmaji says, amazing things are ahead of us. We just have to be receptive. We have to be open. We have to be awake. So, tapas. It is analogous to a spiritual fire that burns within. And we're trying to stoke the inner fire in order to, to have the drive to make progress. So this is very tied closely to brahmacharya. When we have that drive, it is important to harness it and to run with it because it might not last long. And so when we get it, don't waste it. Find a teacher, find a community where you can really start to um, make progress. Practice, 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 whatever it is, whatever it's your asana practice, your meditation, or whatever, when you got it, really go for it. And it's a real gift. You make a lot of progress in that in those times. And like, as you practice, you get and you're in that fire, that state of real drive and motivation. The more you feel it, the more and you see the progress, the more you inclined to continue. So you make progress. So it's just, it just keeps on, it's like a self-fueling fire, keeps on going. So it really helps. So another reason why not to sit on it, you have to go and and um, act on it right away. Svadhyaya, the study of scripture. This is an important one and something that we don't often always take time to do. But even if it's important, and um, not only is it important to read it, but it's important to reflect on it. Even Dharmaji is, humble and saying, like any knowledge I give you, um, check it out. Don't just accept it necessarily. Check it out, reflect on it, and see how it resonates with you. And then keep asking questions, keep trying to listen to it over and over again. And, eventually one day you'll get that eureka moment like, that's it. And then the understanding will come. And, realization is a wonderful thing. The realization of any new knowledge, when you grasp a concept, um, is wonderful thing, because in effect, what is the cause of all suffering? What is the real cause of suffering is ignorance, and most importantly, ignorance of the true self, the nature of the true self. So once you have that, amazing things are ahead of you. I keep coming back to the same ideas. I think I'm getting the Dharma's bug here, but it's true. Like some pieces of knowledge are extremely valuable, and we want to keep on remembering them and keep on latching onto them and keep on putting them into practice. So when you're established, and you know, another reason why we want to be established in Yama and Niyama is because it gives us some mental powers. It augments our mental powers. It augments our discernment. We're able to understand more things, more like things, knowledge of an esoteric nature, higher knowledge, where we have an inclination to be able to understand that a little bit more when we're further established in Yama and Niyama. Makes sense, right? Because the more we're established in it, it implies that we've been on the path for a while. It doesn't come automatically. It doesn't come like at the beginning of the path when we have no knowledge. It takes time to develop this, and to reflect on it. So even if you don't have time to read all the time, I find that podcasts are a great thing, and there's a lot of spiritual ones out there. One that I really like is Wisdom of the Sages. Um, and you can find recordings on YouTube. But if you go to wisdomofthesages.com, you can also get on their platforms. They also have all these certain groups where you can discussion groups, I think. And if that interests you, that's something that to explore. Or spiritual texts. Another thing I love is audiobooks. Sometimes I don't have time to read, but in a car, it's a great thing to listen to, like audio texts. So audiobooks. And so that's a way that you can. There's many things out there that are available on uh, Audible or whatever. These audio um, audiobook applications. So check those out. Those are really useful. Um, and even if it's just reading a mantra a day, there's many mantra. There's a website, I think, mantra.com. Even if you just read a mantra and um, try to understand and just try to read the meaning, the translation of it. Every mantra is based on the name of God, and that renders the heart pure and it renders the mind quiet. So no effort, no utterance of the name of God is ever wasted. So even that counts. That japa, that reading of the mantra, that can count as study of scripture, study of the sacred texts. It's all part of that, right? We do our best. Like we said, we don't always can't always read the have time to read everything, but little goes a long way on a consistent basis. So just try to do something every day, even if it's just reading one mantra, even if it's just 30 seconds, but do it every day. It's like everything else, like practice. When you commit to just even a minute spent 100% of your concentration there, that is, in a way better than spending like an hour of just um, where you're not directed, where your mind is all over the place, but that it's not quite the same potency, right? Even if you spent an hour, if your mind is lost, like about 90% of the time, um, what that only is only really that 10% that really is sometimes that is meaningful in a way, but that said, you had to start somewhere, and again, like with practice, the mind starts to calm down, starts to quiet down. Maybe at the beginning we spend a lot of time like all over the place, all over the map, but it's still, as Dharmaji says also, it's the effort that most important. It's the intent behind the practice that is most important. The results will come, but if you put that little effort in every day, then that's how you make rapid progress. So so those are and so that, that's I, another thing that Dharmaji says on like this Vadiyadi on this, he says, what is more important, what is more valuable than standing on your head 1,000 times? It's when spending one day in reflection, in inflection over the spiritual knowledge of the spirit. So again, that's something to consider. Um, Spiritual knowledge is really the knowledge again is the antidote to suffering. And so the more knowledge we have, the more it's going to help us to free us from the pain and suffering. And so the last one, Ishvara Pranidan. So surrender to God, letting go of your attachment to the ego, the identification of the body, the mind, and the emotions. These are not us. These are not representative of the true nature, because again, these are the representative of what is in the physical universe, the physical material, which eventually dies, right? But the true self within pervades everything, and it is what our true self is. So, um, we start from God, we'll return to God eventually, and we'll go pass through God. God will pass through us in different forms, or we will pass through different forms still, with God within us. So, just the idea that we are all one, um, is not always it's not always easy to visualize God, and so it's why maybe some have a hard time to. It doesn't resonate. You can think of God as a force around us, whatever brings you into a state of reverence. Maybe it's nature, maybe it's looking at stars, sky full of stars, or a great vast infinite space, whatever it's the sky, whether it's the ocean. Something that brings you into a state of awe. And just think of that. How great is that? How magnificent is that? Just like the ocean that is made up of countless drops. We are, each one of us, a drop in that ocean, full of gifts, full of potential. But when you put them all together, you can't tell one drop from the next. So we're all together. It's all shared in the end. Just like the stars in the sky, you can't tell one from the other. But, you know, the universe is constantly expanding. And at any given point, countless number of forms are coming into existence. And guess what? God is a divine spark within each and every one of them, equal portion in each and every being, so subtle. But since it's no form or no name in God, it's everywhere. It's not contained by it can't be contained by our body. It's through us, in us, around us. So just surrendering to the idea that we are, the body is just tiny. It's not even, it's practically not in there when you think of the scope of the whole universe. What are we? We're just not even detectable practically. So, maybe that might put into perspective the grandness and the greatness of everything, of all beings, of this world, of this universe. It's, um, it's just quite amazing, and everything amazing is ahead of us. So, on that note, don't worry about this body. Eventually we're all going to return to God at some point, and in different forms. And each form that we assume is going to be greater and better. And, we evolve to the point where, uh, you know, uh, I'll end with another one of Dharma's images. We start off as like cavemen. We try our best to get out of that caveman mentality. And eventually we become gods ourselves, like those higher beings, angels or whatever you want to call them, or like deities. That is going to be us one day. So, all that to say, we're all on that same path. So, continue to love, continue to share, continue to, do your best. And we're all moving in the same direction. whether you are a bhakti yogi, whether you are um, a karma yogi, whether you are a yana yogi, whether you're hatha raja yogi, whether you're not even a yogi, we are all going there. So let's close with an om again. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Be receptive to the grace of God. Namaste. I hope I didn't bore you to death. Um, so thank you for listening, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Much love. Namaste.